Joining me now is former Boston Police Commissioner Ed Davis. Commissioner, so good to see you this morning. You were in charge during the 2013 Boston Marathon bombing. The device in this incident reportedly used nuts, bolts, and nails, just like the one in Boston. I want to get your reaction to this Manchester, England attack.
Well, the scenes, the photos that were coming from the incident were eerily familiar. They looked like exactly what we experienced: the shredded clothing, the lower body injuries that were occurring. Clearly, someone has used an improvised explosive device to kill or to maim people, and they've targeted children in this particular case. This is a particularly troubling attack. And I know that the authorities in the UK are, as we speak, they're running down the co-conspirators here.
Steve Rogers is here, Ed. He has a question for you.
Yeah.
Steve?
What do you suppose we in law enforcement are going to be, what we're going to have to do in the future? We're going to certainly have to tighten up security, but what's your view on what we really need to do with regard to surveillance, human intelligence, and the collection and gathering of intelligence as we move forward?
Well, that's a great point. We're going to have to increase our systems and drill down into the people that we know are involved in this and do more intense surveillance of them. When they're attacking children like this, we really have to push that end of it. But, you know, one of the problems here that we've identified is no matter where you put the security perimeter, there's going to be a line that forms. And when that line forms, it's subject to attack. So what kind of tactics can we put in place? If I was in policing right now, I'd have a special team that would go to wherever that line is, including undercover officers and uniformed officers. So there'd be a heavy presence there wherever that line is along the line. And people specially trained to identify someone who may be coming in. Because when our intelligence fails, and some of these plots are very sophisticated and only involve one or two people, they're hard to break into. When that fails, we need to have that last line of defense right at the potential soft target. It's a big problem, but it's something I think we can do better at.
Ed, do we have enough manpower and, I guess, police power just in the United States to be able to do that and increase policing like that?
Well, you can't cover every mall and you know, social function that occurs in the United States day after day, but you can identify these soft targets that are particularly attractive to these individuals. Concerts, I think we clearly have to increase security at concerts now. It's going to be an expense. The numbers here have tripled and quadrupled in Boston since the bombing incident. But we have to be prepared for what our threat is, and the threat level is definitely high today.
And I just want to point out with Manchester Arena, they do not allow backpacks into the arena. They don't allow you to bring, say, water bottles into the arena, but this attack happened out near the box office as the concert was ending, and as Prime Minister Theresa May described it, the timing and location of it were geared toward maximum carnage. Kirsten Hagelin has a question for you, Ed.
Ed, yeah, it's interesting you talk about the expense because it's about $4,000 to $5,000 to start for these screeners, so it really can be cost prohibitive for some of these smaller venues. What's interesting to me, and I'd love to get your perspective as, you know, law enforcement here, the last 3 major terrorist attacks on American soil that killed Americans were conducted by people that were radicalized in this country. So can you talk a little bit about what law enforcement across the country, because I know that they're out there, they're fighting this and looking for it, what they're doing for people who might be already in this country and who are watching videos online or being radicalized here?
Well, our sources have been increased in communities that are involved. You know, we're pushing really hard to get people to cooperate with us and to identify any aberrant behavior that they see among people that they know. I mean, quite frankly, to fight drugs, you have to have people from source countries working with you. To fight terrorism, that same thing applies. So understanding who our most likely threats are is a critical component of this. But I go back again to the perimeter issue and the fact that that they learn from us and we learn from them. quite frankly, security starts to break down at the end of an event like this. It's very heavy at the beginning of an event, but at the end, it's sort of like everybody's just trying to get out. We don't think about that as a particularly dangerous time. That has to change.
And Steve, I mentioned that this morning. We're now moving into the summer concert season. So now everybody might be focused on security at concerts and music events and large gatherings during the summer season, but it always seems to be something else. In Britain, it was a single attacker driving a car in the middle of London earlier this year. Here in the United States, with Omar Mateen, it was a nightclub in Orlando, Florida. So again, it always seems to be even our just own individual security concerns, we're looking in a rearview mirror.
Well, we are, but as we see each and every event take place, terrorist attack take place, we learn a little bit more on how we could defend ourselves. And I could see now at many of the concerts that we're going to have moving forward, where there's large crowds, that you're probably going to see these chain link fences, like these long line fences, so people are continuously moving and they're not gathering and concentrated in a particular spot. In addition, as the commissioner said, you could probably see a lot of K-9 units now in parking lots where there are people gathering. The police are going to say, look, we're going to have to break this up, just so that doesn't become the soft target the terrorist is looking for.
And Dagan, you're so right. I mean, how do we prevent this? Because it is just the next thing. It's always the next thing. It's like we are always responding. And that's why prevention is so important. And human intelligence, right? And our local law enforcement, especially, obviously we talk about the FBI and the CIA, but our local law enforcement, they're often the front line of where are these communities, where are potentially these cells, you know, and how can we get at that here to prevent something like this from happening rather than just always responding.
Steve, you talk about K-9 units. That's a really interesting point. Why don't we use dogs more? They could sniff out these explosives and be our first line of defense.
Well, you're right. And Kristen brought up a very significant point, human intelligence. We need more undercover officers out on the streets doing a lot of surveillance to bring that information back.
Ed, what do you make of that? More K-9 units, more individual intelligence just from everyday folks?
Both of those things are very important. The problem with the K-9 unit is it can only work a very limited period of time, and then it has to be rested for a period of time. So people get the impression that if they see the dog, it's working all the time. That's not the case. So there are drawbacks to everything that we try. But the bottom line is they learn from us, and we learn from them. We've learned a lot in the last 24 hours that's going to really affect things as we go into the summer right now.